Welcome to Off Panel. Hey everyone, welcome back to Off Panel. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week we have the cartoonist behind one of my favorite comics around, Head Lopper. It's Andrew MacLean. Thanks for coming on the show, Andrew.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
So, for those that don't know, and if you don't know, you really should read it. Head Lopper is a book about... Now, correct me if I'm wrong with any of this, if I'm like not delivering the soliloquy about Head Lopper well, but it's a book about a warrior named Norgal. Is it Norgal?
Yeah, Norgal, yep.
Norgal. And his adventures with a talking decapitated head of a blue witch named Agatha. And it's amazing. The first trade, or the first collection, The Island or a Plague of Beasts, comes out October 5th. But I know the book's been quite a journey for you. It started when a sketch blog you were part of, or an art collective, Brand New Nostalgia, did a theme week on Vikings, which I think is an amazing origin story. What made this idea different than other ones you would come up with there when you were doing stuff for Brand New Nostalgia?
I mean, mostly it was basically we rotated selecting themes each week, and we didn't have any like parameters. Like we didn't have to do comic related stuff. So some of the themes were like really simple. You know, they were like red or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes the drawings I would do would I would enjoy doing, but maybe they didn't like necessarily speak to me. Sure. You know, something that I found really, really interesting. But when Viking came up, that was something that I was like really excited that we had a cool theme that I could really latch on to. And obviously I enjoyed drawing it because I decided to draw it over and over and over again.
And base an entire book around it. It's amazing. But I think it's really funny. I know you're a metal fan, and I think it's kind of hilarious that Vikings, who I don't know, I think of like, when I think of Vikings, sadly I don't think of like super cool Viking stories or Eric the Red. I think of like Dio's Holy Diver video.
Which, well, once upon a time that was cool, you know.
No, I love that video. That video is like 10 out of 10 amazing. But it is funny how like it seems like something would be kind of up your alley, even though like I don't know if you ever had any specific interest in Vikings before you dove into Head Lopper.
No, not really. Not I think of it. I want a character who's kind of like a big barbarian Viking type character, but in terms of like inspiration, what I draw from, I mostly draw from just a place of fantasy. You know, it's kind of like I've been reading a lot of the Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser stuff. Well, Fafhrd he's from the north. He's a very barbarian-esque, character, but still all the stories are, more akin to, Conan type tone than anything, and some a fantasy type tone than anything that's like, actually Viking or rooted in any kind of like real world mythology. If that makes sense.
Oh, totally. I mean, I think it's funny that the island that you named, the island in the first trade is Bara, and it's actually like there is a real island named Bara, but like I don't think you're really trying to base it in Scotland or anything like that, are you?
No, it's mostly just, I think it was more like I was doing research on really cool settings and things, and I found all I really wanted to draw were like the Highlands of Scotland or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then I found a bunch of reference on the real Bara, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, like it'd be cool if I put it basically on an island just like this. Oh, what's it called? And eventually I was just like, what? Why am I trying to come up with a name or a place? Like I could just put it on this island, And I don't like try to actually be like, accurate in any way, but like it was already such a, beautiful, surreal place. It almost seemed a shame to rename it. You know what I mean? Like it was like no, like it's cool as is. We visited this one town right in the opening, and we visited again in the epilogue, Castle Bay, and and there's there's like a castle. You're right. There's a castle in the bay. Like there's a castle coming out of the water, and that exists in real life. Like in Barra, there's a place called Castle Bay, and Castle Kissimmee is a castle in the bay. So it's like it's already like a magical kind of place. So it's just like I already felt like a setting. So I was just like, fuck it, I'm just gonna make it this island, you know.
That's awesome. I actually had no idea about the castle in the bay part, because that sounds like an amazing place to visit.
Yeah, I want to go so bad. Like I think you have to take like a really small plane to get there, as far as I can tell. And they don't even have like an airport. Or maybe I'm not gonna misspeak, but I just like, it was interesting to see so many pictures where they had clearly flown in on a plane and just like landed like in the grass, you know.
That is so cool.
Yeah, I mean, if I remember right, somewhere on a map I did see an actual airport, but it seems like a really kind of like interesting place that feels a little bit, you know, removed as well and like untouched. It's pretty rad.
I feel like the Black Bog part would probably not be ideal tourism material.
Yeah.
might not be ideal, but so one of the things I want to talk to you about before we really dive into the book is I think the fact, so the Head Lopper, when it first started, was you self-published the first issue, and then for the second issue, which both of these made up the part of the first quarterly issue, is you used Kickstarter to help fund the second issue. But then the quarterly actually came out at Image. I have to ask, like, what made partnering up with Image something you needed to do to make this series happen?
I was just getting really kind of burnt out on the self-publishing thing. And also, like, I don't know if anyone gets into self-publishing as, like, or maybe some do, but I don't think most people get into self-publishing, like, as a desire to be a publisher, you know? Like, I published Head Lopper because I just wanted this comic to be made, you know what I mean? And I was getting rejections from all kinds of folks all over the place for all different projects I was working on. So it was just like, if I wanted it to get made, like, I was like, I'm going to have to make it. So yeah, we published the first one, we paid for the second one, we kickstarted. But by then we had done a couple other projects and several other self-published things. And overall, I just didn't want to go to the post office anymore. I just wanted to get out of it. It was exhausting and it was really, really expensive and it hardly ever paid for itself. And I was just really considering like, just not doing that. I was already doing Apocalyptic Girl at Dark Horse at the time. So I was like, maybe. And it was so much easier knowing someone else was going to print it and put it on shelves. It was just really hard to think I was going to go back to self-publishing Head Lopper and going through all the effort and the expenses. And so I had said, all I did is basically say something to the effect of, I think I might not want to self-publish anymore. And a friend of mine who has a book at a noteworthy book at Image, was just like, well, you got to keep doing Head Lopper or whatever. It's like, I'd like to. And then so he just sent the two self-published issues to Eric Stevenson. And it all happened within like a half hour. Like, I didn't even know he could do it. Yeah, it was really surreal. I was like, I don't want to self-publish anymore. And my friend was like, you can't stop Head Lopper. And then I went to the post office, came back from the post office, and Eric Stevenson was like, "Oh, well, this is cool. Like, why don't we do this at Image?" And I was like, "All right." Yes. Yeah, it was like serendipity. Like, it really just kind of fell together like that.
I think that's like, I've heard stories very similar to that, where it's just like, yeah, I prepared this like epic pitch, and then I like talked to Eric, and he's like, okay. and
yeah, he's so easy to work with, but at the same time, I had pitched it other places and it had gotten, you know, run through all these committees, and all these people were like, you know, different publishers do things differently, and they're like, yeah, we'd like to do Head Lopper, blah blah blah. And one of the reasons why, you know, Image has been so great is all Eric could just go like, yeah, like that. If you want to do it, like we'll print it, and like, that was it. There's no 9-month wait for them to be like, no, we're not interested. You know, it's just like an answer on the spot. So
no passionate negotiations between the two of you or anything like that.
No, not a thing. overall, that's been the relationship so far. Like it's been so easy. I say something, I ask something that I think the answer is no, and they go, "Yeah, sure," and I'm like, "What? Really? All right."
Yeah,
Like,
I think the amazing thing, like just releasing 2 issues of Head Lopper in like self-published fashion, like it's great that you got to do that, but like you're saying, it's amazing when you see people like Jeff Smith, who did Bone for like 60 issues, all through
yeah,
cartoon books, or like Terry Moore, who does all this stuff through his own abstract studios. Like you have to have like infrastructure. Bone, he had to create cartoon books for that, and he had his like wife, and he had other people involved with that, and it's just kind of amazing. I don't think people realize like all the work that goes into it, but that is one of the cool things about doing what you did, because by making comics, you proved that you could make the comic, and in a way that kind of greased the wheels to building that image relationship.
yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's there's always obviously there's always the question people want to know, like how you get into comics, how you break in. That's the phrase or whatever. But I mean, every single every single person has a different story and how they pulled it off, because the real answer is you just make comics. You just do it. And as soon as someone says like, oh, this person can actually just make a comic, then they're much more inclined to hire you. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. I mean, like that shows so much initiative, and it shows that you can. I mean, especially because like that's one of the things that I don't think a lot of people realize is like for the first 2 issues, you wrote it, you did the art for it, and you also hand lettered it, which is like, astounding. But did Mike Spicer color the first versions too?
Yeah. Mike and I, we did one kind of before that. We had done one 8-page comic in the actually the brand new nostalgia anthology that we had done. We colored that, and he just understood kind of how my like style translated to like 3D shapes better than anyone I had worked with at that point. So when I started doing Head Lopper, he was like my first choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that totally makes sense. But I mean, like seeing how you were like legit DIY. You were like, I'm gonna do it all myself, besides the colors, and like that is a proving ground right there. But one of the things I actually I don't know if you remember this. I briefly talked to you about this at Emerald City Comic Con. I was one of those people who came up to talk to you about it. But all I wanted to talk about is the fact it's a quarterly book, because I think the fact you did it as a quarterly both makes it, I don't know, like you read monthly books and sometimes they don't really have as much impact as they should, because it's like you don't really feel like you get much of the story sometimes. But with the quarterly, like reading Head Lopper, you feel like you get so much, and you feel so immersed in the world while you're reading it, that it makes it such a more enjoyable experience. And I love that in the back of issue number 1, you said a longer book can make for a better book. Do you think it worked out that way?
Yeah. I mean, I still believe that. I think, yeah. I mean, going forward next year with the next Headlopper arc, we're gonna still do quarterly, just because it's hard to imagine not now. It's yeah. I mean, I decided to do it this way just because exactly what you just said. So often I would get like I'd be excited about a new book coming out for a while, and then when issue 1 would come out, I would check it out, and I would think that the writing was pretty good, and I would think the art was pretty good, but after only 18 pages or whatever, I didn't find that I was sympathetic with the characters yet. Nothing seemed dangerous yet. It just wasn't enough time
Mm-hmm.
to get hooked. And I remember being like, I can't say any of this is bad, but I still don't feel that like I'm not really looking forward to issue 2. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
And I
totally.
was like, and I just yeah, and I kind of blamed it not on any of the talent, or the creative team or anything, but so much as just the length of the book. Like if they just had more pages, I would be able to care about the character more.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the interesting things about comics is like it's reading like a 20 page comic from one creative team and reading a 20-page comic from another creative team can be an entirely different experience, because like
Yeah.
some people like it's some people will say that like this is a bad thing, but some people write for trade, or like create a comic for the trade, and like so you're just reading, you feel like you're reading one part of a much larger story. And then other
Right.
times you can read a 20-page comic and it feels like a more complete story and you feel invested. But with the quarterly one, I mean, like that's one of the things I think is great about the first issue is like the first issue you have an awesome action scene right off the top. You have like, you know, some background for, or some like, you know, hinted at background for Norgal, and you have like great introductions to all the characters to the point where you kind of feel like you're, like you said, you're sympathetic to them and you want to know more about them. And I don't know, I mean, I don't think every comic could work that way, but it works really well for this one.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. Everyone's gonna make a different type of comic and everything, and I'm sure a lot of people hear me say, you know, trash an 18-page comic, the concept of it, but really at the end of the day, like there are people who nail that form, you know. But
Totally.
I guess it was just for me that I learned by self-publishing that I liked the just a longer page count. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And some people might hate that. You know what I mean? Like it may not fit their like process or whatever. You know?
Oh, absolutely. One thing I'm curious about though is did Image, when you came up with the idea of I want to do this in a quarterly format, was that more of like the yeah sure like type of thing that you had with Eric to start with, or was that more of a conversation?
No, it was so easy. I almost I almost didn't. I feel like I'm like letting out a secret or something. That like, hey, if you want, you can.
You wouldn't believe how easy this is.
Yeah, you can do things the way you want. But yeah, I literally I was nervous to even ask it because it's so kind of against the industry. But I still felt confident that like it would, you know, that it would be a good idea, that it could create a quality comic. But so I almost didn't ask him. I almost chickened out. But then I was just like, you know what? He can just say no. You know, like Image can say like, no. Like comics aren't quarterly in America. Like we don't do that. So I just gave him the chance to say no, and he didn't even think twice about it. He was just like, yeah, you want to do that? Sure. And like, just like that. And I was like, all right. now if it fails utterly because of the release schedule, it's totally on me. You know, but luckily I think people seem to like it too, and I like working that way, so I'm grateful for it.
Were there any like surprises at all when you were doing that, where you were just like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, I know that some artists and some, you know, some cartoonists and everything, when they're working on a schedule, it keeps them focused or something like that. But were you ever like, man, I got 3 months, I'm gonna take a couple weeks off and just kick my feet up?
No, I don't even know how to like relax anymore. I mean, but you know, before when you're self-publishing, it's not, you don't have the luxury of it being your like of having a schedule at all. You know, basically, like, you know, self-publishing was never something that could, you know, put food on the table or pay rent. You know what I mean? Right. Like it was a lot of work and, you know, fiscally not a lot of return. You know what I mean? So I feel like you really had to have that like that kind of like work ethic or whatever, mm-hmm. be like I don't know, almost like an obsession rather than a decision. You know what I mean? So I wasn't worried about a 3-month schedule. It sounded like I thought I was going to be able to do even more. I thought I'd be able to, like, if I had my way, that each comic would be even longer. You know, I just fill up the whole 3 months and then move on to the next issue. Yeah.
Man, if it was any longer, like that, the thing that I love is like the trade that's coming out is like, it's hard to even call it a trade. I mean, it's like, it's going to be like at least 280 pages, I think. And yeah. I mean, it's going to have, okay, I'm just going to do a quick walkthrough. The 4 quarterly issues. You said there's going to be extra material in there about side characters. And you also said there's going to be designs and there's the pinups. And I'm guessing you'll probably put the variant covers in there too. I mean, like that's a monster. I love it. But did you ever think about breaking that up into smaller editions, or are you just like, nah, we're going with the Giganto version?
It was basically, I always picture it to be like an ongoing type story, but that's just like the initial conversations were with Image was just like, hey, how many of these you want to do? And I was like, it'll take me 4 to tell the rest of the story. And they're like, okay, let's do 4. Yeah, it was it was super casual. And then I just talked to him later and asked him to do more. But like for the characters, I always picture them being like ongoing characters. And so basically, I just wanted the whole story to be in one book. Do you know what I mean? So it wasn't so much that I was like, okay, let's hit a page count. Like I wasn't saying like I want a big book. I just said I have 4 pieces of story. They should take this many pages. So it just happens to be a big book. So I just like the idea of beginning to end is all in one story because we leave here. Well, I don't know. I don't want to give away too much, but in like say you're reading like a Conan or like a Fafhrd and the Grey Mouse or whatever, like those old fantasy stories. Each new story, whether it may or may not even be chronological, you don't know how they got there or something. So like you go new places and Conan meets new characters and Fafhrd and the Grey Mouse, they meet new characters and they have a totally new adventure. So I really want to do that, and that's the plan with Head Lopper, is that I'd like each volume to be the adventure that takes place in that place. So in that setting. So for example, like the island, Plague of Beasts, this is the story that takes place on Bara, and then going forward, each volume or whatever would take place in a totally new setting. Probably have a lot of new characters in each places. So it's like, yeah, after this, we won't see like Lulak again. You know, those characters.
I hope not.
Yeah. But yeah, for example, yeah, we won't see that royal family again or something. Their story is like told. So that was kind of my image, my kind of vision for it overall. And it just happened to be a 280-page book.
Yeah.
You know, that's just how long it took, I guess.
One of the things I really love about it is, like, I know you're a Mike Mignola fan, and we'll touch on that, but it kind of reminds me of, in some ways, like, as far as a comics connection, is like kind of how Mignola would do Hellboy books, where it would be like, you know, you start off with kind of a centralized narrative, but then kind of when he left the BPRD, Hellboy was just kind of doing his thing. And like he would have,
he was just wandering for a while.
Yeah, and he would just go on adventures. Like he'd be under the sea for this one, or he'd be like, you know, fighting, like, I don't know, like the whole Sound and Fury thing that finished everything off. He'd be like doing epic quests with like King Arthur and yada yada yada. But that's one of the things I really like about Head Lopper, is it feels very lived in the same way that Hellboy does. Like you, in just like the first trade, you have like Norgal running into Orin in the first issue, and you know you're kind of already planting seeds for like other adventures. Like you could even go back and like talk about like the things that they got up to, or like, you know, when I'm gonna horribly butcher this name, Zania Kotaka.
Yeah, no, that's correct. Yeah,
okay. Yeah, like, so he has like a tiny run-in with this other warrior who's been abducted to be a sacrifice. And like, you know, she like basically says like, maybe our paths will cross in the future, and maybe their paths will cross in the future. And I think, I don't know, as a reader, especially as a Hellboy fan, I like the idea that you could make this book, you know, independent adventures that the only connection is really like Norgal and Agatha.
Yeah, exactly. And I try not to plan too far in advance either. But I try to weave. I want it to be simple. I want it to be easy to follow. So, but I'm trying to weave like a thin thread through everything, of course. But at the same time, I don't want readers to have to memorize a whole bunch of fantasy jargon, you know, a whole bunch of bullshit. You're just supposed to sit down and just like read the thing and have fun. But yeah, I do picture it being really lived in, and I think it's one of those things where there's a lot of stuff that I maybe have in my head that will just never get told, but it kind of keeps the infrastructure of like the universe intact. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. No, totally. And I think it's, I don't know, you don't want to create a book where, like, let's say like 3 years from now, you have to like put in notes where like, previously in Head Lopper number 3, like where you're like having to reference stuff like you're a Marvel book or something.
Yeah, I want to avoid stuff like that, you know, as much as possible. But at the same time, it's I do have a grander scheme type story in there, so it's like it's always it's a balance. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I don't want something that happens, you know, three volumes from now be contingent upon just like a single conversation that you didn't know that you should be memorizing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if I ever call back on something, I hope it's the goal is to have it at least be a big enough event that if you read it, you remember it anyways. Oh, like when so and so died or something like that, you know.
Hmm.
But I'm hoping that they'll all kind of stand alone, relatively independently, you know.
Yeah, well, I think that works really well so far in the quarterlies. Like that's one of the things I thought was kind of fun about like the first four is like each issue kind of has like its own like I don't know to take a video game term like a mini boss,
Yeah,
and then like it builds into like the fight against the God, I'm now spacing his name. The Bara. I got the villain's name is the Island.
that's right.
Anyways, but I mean, like, it kind of leads into that and the whole Lulak thing and everything. But I love that, like, it kind of feels like it's you, like you said, you have this thread that's moving forward, but you also have like it's just kind of isolated. It can have you can just enjoy the one issue for the one issue.
Yeah, that was a real goal of mine too. Is because I want it to feel kind of like episodic.
Mm-hmm.
And I know two things. A, like I'm giving you, at least 45 pages of story. It should have a pretty clear beginning, middle, and end. Uh, um, and also you got to wait 3 months in between each issue, so it better carry itself. You know what I mean? Like it better be its own little like self-contained package as much as possible, or I feel it should be. So I kind of think of them. I try to, even though they're obviously not, they're one of a series. I try to think of them as like what I always call like almost like chronological one shots. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like each thing should stand alone at least fairly well, but still lead you into the next in some way. I don't know. It's just like it's always like trying to make a puzzle.
Oh, totally. Yeah, and I'm always curious about processes because especially for something like this where it's kind of had like a varied origin story and everything like that. Like when you're like, do you have like a grander plan in the background, or is some of the stuff that you're doing you kind of jamming on the page and having fun and like you have a general idea of where you're going?
It started out as jamming on the page. You know what I mean? Because like, or had very loose stuff when I very first started back in the self-published stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and it was always just a dream to be able to continue it. And I had like a kind of infrastructure, kind of a map in my head, but it just didn't have this level of detail to it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because like you said, it came about being kind of strange. So I do, but like I said, I do have a grander scheme thing in there, but a lot of it is just the point of it is mostly to kind of have fun. And so I'm not eager to really get into the kind of grander scheme things. I mostly just do my best not to screw it up. You know what I mean? Like the fun thing for me and hopefully for readers is just the adventures of Norval and Agatha. All the kind of bigger questions that come up, and there'll be answers for them and everything. But the goal is just is to make an adventure comic. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's working really well the way it is. I just one of my favorite things. I love that there's like hinted at mythology things like his nickname is the Son of the Minotaur, and like like that could be its own can of worms and things like that. But one of my favorite random things about the book is it seems really obvious that Norgal actually hates the term Head Lopper. Like every time somebody is like Head Lopper and he's like Norgal. I think that's just like a funny little thing. But so when you're scripting the book, do you keep it pretty loose considering the fact your artist is probably gonna know what you want?
No, I actually script really tight.
Really?
Yeah, I describe like camera angles and everything to myself, but it's more so just to save myself time later. Because like when I'm running, while I'm writing, even though I know where it's going, there's a certain amount of it is kind of like stream of consciousness kind of thing where while I'm writing panel to panel, I'm still seeing what it looks like. You know what I mean? So it's like that to me is like the first instances of like working on the design itself. So like if I just write those notes down to describe the scene, then I it's less like work for me on the back end. So yeah, I end up just writing like I'll even sometimes describe like a camera angles and how many and like the arrangement of the panels on the page and everything, because and I'll always write notes on like if it's a big panel, it's a small panel, stuff like that, just so that if I do it that way, I can make sure that there's enough like establishing panels for like if I can actually look at my notes and be like, oh look, like I haven't had any room for for like a big background in a while, like the reader be forgetting where these people are standing, you know what I mean? So it really helps me like keep the visual stuff kind of in check before I even get to that like stage,
Yeah, I think that like if you're anything like me and you were kind of doing in a looser style, like when I write notes to myself, sometimes I look back at it and I'm like, what the hell was I saying? So I imagine if you're writing a script and you have to look at it as when you're getting ready to draw it and you're like, I don't remember what this is, that might be problematic. And I'm afraid that'll happen. So so I'm always like, I'm just gonna write this down. That seems like a pretty good plan. So okay, I have to ask, have you ever read the manga One Punch Man?
No, I haven't, but I've seen like I've seen it, and I saw the first like maybe 2 episodes of the anime or whatever. But I always thought it looked pretty cool.
Yeah,
it's obviously super intense, and also like the simplicity of the character is just like really funny.
Yeah. Well, like not to compare the two really, but I one thing I think is really funny about Head Lopper that is also true about One Punch Man is it's like I think like Norgal and Agatha are both so kind of like comically badass that it's like they almost feel like they can't lose. But I mean, like when you're writing it, I mean, is that something you kind of want to come across, or is it like I'm curious if it kind of complicates things to like come up with challenges that like their magic or steel won't have a problem against.
Have
a problem against. Rather.
I do want them to kind of feel like invincible, because like at the end of the day, a big part of what the book is about, like obviously I'm trying to just like squeeze everything into one book. Basically, I still want a big part of it is also a big part of the book is also just like the action. It's just the fight scenes. Mm-hmm. So I want these characters to just like be unstoppable. Like I always, it's like probably really silly, but I always picture it's like how like when you have things in a genre, everything in the movie, I'm thinking of a movie at the time, it kind of falls into place. So if you have a comedy that's also action, there's always something a little bit funny about about even the action part. I always try to kind of like separate it a little bit. Like each scene kind of should, I hope, has its own tone, and the action scenes, at least in my mind, they're like that tone is like dialed up to like 11. Like I picture a movie going actually like really really fast, like almost jarringly so. Than other scenes that are say quiet or whatever. And so like and in those moments I want it to feel like at least Norval can just like literally run through the enemy. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like it's just like I want him to feel invincible,
Yeah, totally. I mean, like I definitely think you convey that because at multiple points in the book, not to spoil it, but I feel like this is a selling point. Norgal and Agatha are swallowed by something and then killed the thing by being inside of them, which I think is just like so badass. I mean, like if you're, I'm pretty sure if I was swallowed by something, I would just be done for. I wouldn't be able to actually continue fighting at that point. But that's the thing I really enjoy is like like a great fight scene that you have in the first issue is the Wolves of Bara. And like there's that one page that has just, or I guess it's a splash, so it's 2 pages where it shows how Norgal is fighting the wolves and all the different ways he's doing it. And I love like the step by step art, and it I love like it doesn't really have any panels, but it's just kind of playing with like the way that comic art can work through time, and it's actually showing the sequences of the fight. Like, how do you approach like an action sequence? Like, do you think there's a point where you can show too much, or I don't know? I guess what's your approach on action scenes?
I really like like choreography in film, like fight choreography and everything. And so and it always amazes me that they clearly, and every single person on camera or whatever, clearly worked out every single step. Like the whole story of that fight has been worked out, and everybody knows it, all the actors and everything. And often sometimes I just don't think that sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes comic fights feel a little half-assed. Like, it's just like sometimes I just feel like they're like not choreographed at all, but the writers fight scene here, and that means generally like, oh, there's some punches being thrown where there's like no backgrounds and everything, and in the room and in the setting, sometimes it doesn't seem to matter as much anymore. And I want my action scenes to feel more like they were choreographed for film. Like, they're running into things, they're interacting with the environment. Every actual strike is kind of like planned out, where in like I want everything that is invented to have a home and kind of stay in it. Do you know what I mean? So like,
totally.
If Norval drops his helmet, well, when Norval gets out of this fight, he's gonna have to go find his helmet. I want all the pieces to have a home. So I try to, and that's my taste. You know what I mean? Because I find that stuff just fun. So totally. I'm not. I mean, like I said, like, people have been drawing great fight scenes forever. I'm not sure that I'm improving it. I'm just trying to I'm trying to amuse myself, I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally know what you're saying, because it's like a lot of times in comics, like, and I'm not saying that there's a right way or a wrong way to do an action scene, but a lot of times you kind of see like the before and after, where it's like the person's lining up a punch and then you have like the punch, or the after effect of the punch. But like sometimes like the interesting stuff is in like the middle of it. Like you were talking about movies. Have you ever seen John Wick?
Yeah, I like John Wick. That was really...
Yeah, like the bonus features on that Blu-ray is amazing, because like I never really thought about all the work that goes into the choreography. And like they walk through like the whole sequence where they have the fight at the club, and it's just like incredible the amount of planning that goes into it. And I don't know. What's that?
And so much practice. It's like they have to do it over and over again and work it all out. Like it's really impressive.
Yeah, I mean it's unbelievable, because if you screw up, you could like legitimately get hurt.
Yeah.
And with like that's one of the things I really like about the fight sequences in the book, is just like it kind of feels like you're seeing, like it says something about Norval to see how he fights. And I think you can really see that in the way you draw the scenes. But anyways, that's a lot of action scenes. But I wanted to ask about like villains, because I think Bara and Lulak are both excellent villains. It's hard to create a villain that's really impactful, but I think you did it. What do you think makes a good villain in your mind?
Honestly, like I'm in love with like just genre in general. So the stuff I generally come up with, I don't necessarily like shy away from cliches, or I don't really shy away from tropes or whatever. I kind of I enjoy a genre being a genre. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to mix anything up. So like, I mean, what's his face? Not Bara, Lulak, he only ever wears black. Like he's got black hair, he's got like gray skin. Like he's like not, he's actually not original at all. And neither is Bara. I really wanted to create the kind of like quintessential, fantasy, villain type characters. Obviously like I respect them, so I'm trying to breathe as much life as I can into it. But their starting place is like, all right, what is the exact thing you expect? Okay, now how do I try to make that thing badass? Even though we've seen it before. I mean, I think with Lulak, you can be kind of like sympathetic, to the path he's walked.
Totally.
But I think that was kind of inherent in a character who's constantly like kind of like double crossing. You know what I mean? Like it's just his story kind of like found itself based on his role. Do you know what I mean? Like just his role with Bara and his role with like the royal family and all that. And you can feel bad for him. He had a rough go, top to bottom. But that's how you like create it, like a bad guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, who Lulak reminds me of is, and I actually can't remember the character's name, but in Lord of the Rings, there's that.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I know it. Well, he's based loosely on him. Grima Wormtongue. Is that what you're thinking?
Oh yeah,
of?
yeah. That is it.
Yeah, and yeah. So basically, when I started out, I was like, I want a character that is, and you don't learn much about Grima in the movie or the book, really, like his past, if I remember right. Mm-hmm. But I wanted a character that felt like Grima Wormtongue, except he could actually swing a sword. I wanted someone who was as greasy and slimy as Grima Wormtongue,
but capable.
But you could get in a sword fight. Like Grima Wormtongue he was kind of like a coward, he was like a weakling. So I wanted a character that was as slimy and gross as Grima Wormtongue, except like even that if need be, like he could hold his own against Norgal for at least a few seconds. Like he can actually swing his sword.
Yeah, you're like, this could be a question. Then you're like, okay, maybe not. But yeah, like when I see Grima Wormtongue, it's like that's one of the funny things, and I love what you said about the villains. Is like, you dressed him all in black. He's gray. He's kind of slimy like Grima Wormtongue. One of the funny things is about those characters is you always kind of feel like when you're reading it or watching it or whatever, you're always like, how do you not know this guy is a bad guy? Like the queen is all up in his business. She's like, I don't trust you. You are no good. And the king's like, I don't know. We'll have to see. Like maybe he's not so bad.
You know what though? Honestly, that whole bit right there with the king and the queen having different opinions on him is really just. That's an illustration of me and my wife. It's uncanny how she can she's a better judge of character than I am. I've noticed. And so like she sees, so I had the queen right at the beginning. She doesn't trust Lulak for a second. And for whatever reason, just to his detriment, the king saw no problem with it, and that was all it was. It's just I liked the idea that the queen would be a better judge of character than the guy who actually was sitting the throne first.
I would say that's actually generally true. Like my wife and I are like in the exact same way as your wife and you.
Yeah. I think that's true. I didn't want to totally generalize, but it seems one could be made.
I would say from what I've seen, that's probably true. Like my wife, it's not quite as bad as some people, but sometimes I'm like innocent to the point where it's like, she's like, how do you not know that people are bad sometimes? I'm like, oh, this person seems good. And she's like, he's terrible. Stay away from him.
Yeah. It's, I don't know. Well, I guess they're just smarter than we are. I think it's that simple.
Okay, so the last question about like the characters and everything that I want to ask before some other stuff before we close. I know you get questions about this relationship all the time, and this isn't even going to be a question. I just want to say I really think Agatha is Norgal's best friend. That's it. I know you can't reveal anything, and I know you will probably get into stuff down the line, but like it really came to like, when I was rereading it, and there's the third part in the first issue where Norgal and her are rolling around the mountain, and like she's like saying bop 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 bip, or like, you know, like making all the sound effects while he's jumping, and then she's like ox leap, and he's like throws her away because he's, you know, being surly at her, and then he keeps making sounds even though she's gone. I'm like, they're best friends. I know it.
You know, I think the verdict is still out on, you know, it's like it's like they're kind of like stuck with each other, and eventually I'll go into more why. But I think the part of it is that their relationship is still a little on the new side. You know what I mean?
Right.
And they'll I think at times they'll hate each other more than we've seen them, and at other times I think they'll they'll tolerate each other better than we've
Not
seen.
Not quite like each other.
Yeah, I think they'll swing. I think they'll still swing in both directions.
It's a very fascinating relationship to have at the center of it, because it's like it's hard not to read it and just kind of speculate like, what is their relationship? But I'm firmly in the camp of friendship. I know we'll get to that later, but
Yeah.
So
yeah, there's a lot to it, and I'll get into it. I feel like you know, piece by piece. I feel like you if I put two characters like this together, I have to give, you know, some more specific answers, at least over time. But at the same time, I think I just like them as a team, you know? So we're just going to keep watching them torture each other and back and forth.
I do like that in stories, though, like when, you know, when the people, you know, whatever the medium is, whenever whoever's creating it trusts the reader to, like, accept the fact that, like, there was something before this and there will be something after this, and, like, you just have to enjoy it for the ride. And I think Head Lopper does a really good job of that.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, it's tough. I mean, I feel like our kind of like current storytelling culture is kind of like handholdy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just I sometimes something can be totally nonsensical, and you can still just enjoy it. Like, you just don't need to have all the answers, and because sometimes you get the answers and like it was way better. Like, but it was a mystery, you know, like, and not that I have this in mind for Head Lopper. I do have it all kind of worked out in my head, but it's, I'm a huge Tarantino fan, and I always call this kind of technique, I always call it the
suitcase,
the Pulp Fiction, briefcase. It's like, what, we never know what's in that briefcase. And you could speculate wildly what's in that briefcase, but whatever you come up with, your best answer is not nearly as good as the mystery. You know what I mean? It's just like the people's reactions to the way when they open the briefcase and there's like light coming out, they're always like totally speechless and like, is that what I think it is? You know what I mean? And they never tell you what it is. And that, like, that kind of hype, the hype for with no answer is like, that's where all the fun is anyways. You know what I mean? It's like sometimes that the not knowing is the best part about a mystery, you know, not the answer.
Totally. I mean, like, honestly, if that was like, if the scene was told from the other perspective and it was just like a pile of drugs, like nobody would ever talk about that scene.
So what? Yeah. But, or like, what if, or it's like shiny. So like, okay, it's like gold. Okay, so what? You're like, okay, so, but it was electronic, so maybe it was like a bomb. Okay, so what? None of those things are very interesting, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I can't think of anything big enough that would actually be as kind of like shocking and entertaining as just not knowing. You know?
Yeah. I mean, that's the funny thing about storytelling is it's like, you for the one or two people who would be satisfied with your answer, there's probably gonna be like 100 people who would be annoyed by it. And
Yeah.
so it's like, what's the point of even answering it? Like that makes that scene just an instant classic. And I love it. I think it's great.
I think it's perfect. Yeah.
This is kind of a completely random aside, but recently I saw like some people on Twitter talking, some like prominent creators talking about like, like they didn't really like the term creator owned. And because basically it just doesn't mean anything. You don't call like, books that are being released by people who release them themselves as creator-owned books, because like that's not really a thing in anything else besides comics. But one of the things that I think, works in the favor of somebody like you, like who's releasing a creator-owned, and for somebody like me who's like a reader, is like knowing that you're doing your own story the way you want to do it, with just basically Eric Stevenson being like, sure, go ahead. Means that I can, like, if I've appreciated your work before, like I'll know that you'll do things like that way. It's kind of like it's almost like when you're buying vegetables and it's like organic. It's like I know what to expect from this. I know that like Andrew is going to put his heart and soul into this book because it's his book, it's his baby, and like we align in other ways, and I've liked him on other projects, so I'll get the best version of him. I don't know. That's really random, but I mean, like, it kind of ties into what you're saying. It's just like, if you were telling it for somebody else, you might have to reveal things faster than you'd want to. But because you're telling it for yourself, you can golden suitcases up for the as much as you want.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I like that too. I mean, beyond just the beyond just the idea of questioning what we should call it or whatever. I mean, I love it. The relationship I have with Image is on my worst day, on my most stressed out day, I still know I have nothing to complain about. You know what I mean? Like, I have no right to complain. Like I still get to do it the way I want it. I hope that stamp means something to someone, but I'm just, all I can do is, I know there are so many people who don't have the luxury of doing exactly what they want. So I just keep reminding myself to be grateful for it,
Yeah. Well, speaking of things to be grateful for, I got to give you credit. Like the pinups and the variants you got for that book is amazing. I mean, like just to like scratch the surface, you have Raphael Grandpa, Gabriel Ba, Alexis Zirit, Mike Allred, James Stokoe, and Scotty Young. I mean, like that's, like I said, not even scratching the surface. How were you just like, really? You guys are actually going to do this? This is happening? You're going to do pinups and variants for this? This is amazing.
Yeah, same thing. All I can do is be grateful, and I don't know how any of it happened. People have just been really cool and really supportive. Some of those people, like, I was already kind of friends with, or I knew we had like, some mutual respect for each other. Some of them were just a total stab in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know James Stokoe at all. I mean, personally, I don't think he didn't know the book or anything, so that one was a stab in the dark. But and some of them were just people being like, hey, like I drew this picture like for fun, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
Is every version of everything kind of has happened with the book, and I don't know. You go back 2 years ago or something, I would have been like, what? No, those guys would never draw something for me.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I love things like that, because it's nice for me, because it's a great way to see some artists that I've never experienced before. And I think one of the funniest things is my favorite pinup that was in the first 4 issues was actually by your colorist, Mike Spicer. Like,
oh, really? Yeah.
I didn't even know he like did not coloring, and like seeing that, I was just like, this is amazing. Like it's incredible, and like I don't know, that I really enjoyed seeing all the different takes on it, and Mike's stuff was just amazing.
Yeah, I think he was really looking forward to. He started to do more and more of that. I'm not sure if he's still doing it, but it just seemed like he started to get into his own like kind of digital painting and stuff. And yeah, so he did one just for fun. I was like, all right, well, we got to run this, of course. But
All right, just
Yeah, I mean, there's a there's a lot of colorists who are actually like great artists as well, and we just don't get to see their art all that much, you know.
oh yeah, like Matt
I mean,
Wilson. Matt Wilson, big time colorist. He did a print with his own art for Emerald City Comic Con, and I bought it, and it's just I love it. It's fantastic, and
yeah,
it's
a
cool
lot of
seeing that. So I just have two more questions for you.
yeah, sure.
I have to, like I said, I have to ask about Mike Mignola. I know that, like, people talk about influences, and like, I'm not going to ask you who your influences are and stuff like that. But I know, like, I know Mike's work was more than just like an influence. He's kind of like why you wanted to be a creator, right? Like, what's the story with Mike Mignola as like somebody that impacted you as a comic creator?
Yeah, yeah, I read comics, off and on, through childhood and up through like, college and everything. I wanted to draw comics when I was, in, early teens and everything. And then I got into music, and I was playing in bands and everything, and I just wanted to make music after that. And I always drew here and there for fun, just for creative release or whatever. But music was kind of like was my goal. And then music was always tough because it's hard keeping bands together and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But also I found I started reading Hellboy. I don't know, in my 20s at some point. I checked it out, and it was for me. I didn't grow up in a town with like an actual like shop
Mm-hmm.
with a comic shop or anything. It was like wasn't you didn't come by comics all that easily, even though I read them as much as I could. So I didn't know there was like a whole like to me comics. There was like the comics meant like superheroes. Comics meant like like kind of house styles and all this stuff. And I liked all different types of art. I didn't realize that there was all these small press. I didn't know about shows like TCAF and like SPX and stuff where there's people who like who draw comics in all different styles about all these different topics and stuff. And so when I saw Hellboy and I saw Mike's art and actually read it, it opened like doors in my mind being like, oh wait, like I'm like, I felt dumb. I was like, yeah, I guess comics can just be anything, can't they? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and it just like made me be like, oh shit, like you can do anything. And then that made me go looking for all the other comics that I knew at that point must exist. You know what I mean? I'm like, all right, so if you can do anything, that means everything's out there. And so it just really got me to look beyond what was just there on the shelf in front of me. You know what I mean? Search things out and everything, and in turn, seeing how you could do comics any way you wanted. It got me really excited to figure out what would a comic be if I could. What would a comic be if I was going to make a comic the way I wanted? You know what I mean? And then that's really what got me to start making them in the first place. And then next thing I knew, I just didn't. Being in a band and playing music or whatever wasn't as important to me anymore. I was just then obsessed with making a comic, because making comics, you can just be one person, and you can create so much. Like, I'm just one person. I write a script and I write these characters, and you've created like a whole world. I didn't need to hold a band together. I didn't need to practice. And that was a thing too. Like, making comics is always like one of the things about making music and being in bands and stuff is that like you write some songs and you only have a handful of songs, and you play those same songs over and over and over again. And you write new songs, you play those songs over and over and over again. But making comics, every time I would draw a panel, I'm like, no, that panel's done. I never have to actually draw the panel again. You know what I mean? So it's always like, it's always this kind of like output of creativity that you don't have to compromise at all. You don't have to. There's no budget. I don't need anyone's help to do it, and it was just And to circle back around, to get me down that road, Hellboy was pretty much got my mind, headed down that road.
That's amazing. I mean, like, that's so cool because, it tying even more full circle back, it takes us back to the beginning where, if you have like that's the cool thing about comics is if you have an idea and you have like the will to do it, you can bring your comic to life and you can make it, and maybe you can find a home for it at like somewhere like Image, or you can kickstart it, or you can do all these different things. And I don't know. I mean, like, you have like the ideal situations, like what Mike's done, and like it's cool seeing. I don't know. That's one of the amazing things about what he did was it isn't just like his idea became a universe, and it brought in people like Guy Davis, and it brought in people like Tyler Crook and like James Herron and John Arcudi and stuff like that. And it's amazing to see something like that happen. And like I could see how that type of thing could be inspiring for a lot of creative types.
Yeah. I had felt like until I read Hellboy, I had never read a comic that was so like potent. You know what I mean? Like you said, it's a livable. It's like a lived-in universe. You know what I mean? Like every little panel, it always felt like it had weight, and it felt even when it was light, somehow it felt like important. And or like reverent or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't know a comic could evoke those types of I don't know, themes or emotions. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, so last question. I mean, I know that you have big plans for Head Lopper and everything like that, but for what's next, per the back of issue number 4, your plan is for the next season of Head Lopper to start sometime in early 2017. Is that still the plan?
Yeah, that's the plan. Yeah, so what I'm calling issue 5 will be in March of 2017. I think the second Wednesday in March.
Wow, that is very precise.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I guess I plan ahead. When you're doing when it takes you 3 months to draw each issue, you have to, you have to get out there. Also, a lot of publishers they fill up their print schedules. Yeah, pretty far in advance. And Image has been pretty like pretty easy peasy with me, but I don't want to like abuse that either. So I try to tell them I try to tell them my plans as early as possible so that they can adjust or I don't want to screw them either.
No, you don't want to just keep like hoping for the easy yeses forever. It's good that you're taking control of your world, but I can say for myself, I'm very excited to see what's next for Norgal and his BFF Agatha. But thank you so much for coming on, Andrew. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with cartoonist Andrew MacLean. You can find him on Twitter at @Andrew_MacLean and his work in Head Lopper at Image Comics, with the first collection dropping on October 5th. Don't forget to like the show on Facebook at /sketched, that's SKTCHD, follow it on Twitter at @SketchComic, or follow me at @SliceFriedGold. Want more from Off Panel? Subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher and give the show a rating and review while you're at it. Also, my comics adjacent newsletter called The Crossover is in the middle of its first season. Make sure to subscribe at bit.ly/The Crossover Newsletter if you want more writing from me. A quick thanks to the band Wolfpack, whose excellent track Outro from their album Volmilch opens and closes the show now. Give them a listen as they're totally rad. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for a new episode.